I stood at the back of the church, wearing the suit she helped me pick out. The one she said made me look almost handsome. I was holding folded paper in my trembling hands, vows I'd written in secret, rewritten a dozen times, memorized like prayers. She was at the altar. But not with me. Her fiancé, her real one, stood tall beside her in a rented tux that didn't fit him right. He smiled like a man who'd already won. And maybe he had. Because I was just the understudy. The backup plan. The fool who believed, "I love you," meant the same thing when whispered to me in the dark as it did when she said it to him in daylight. I had been her secret for 2 years. Her safe space. Her emotional crutch when he didn't listen, didn't care, didn't show up. And I showed up every time. I held her through panic attacks. I stayed up until 3 a.m. talking her through doubts she'd never voiced to him. I became the man she said she wished he could be. And then she invited me to her wedding. Not as a guest. As her backup groom. Just in case he doesn't show, she'd said with a laugh that wasn't really a joke. He showed. And so did I. But not the way she expected. I met her on a Tuesday. The kind of Tuesday where the sky forgets how to stop crying. The coffee shop was packed with people escaping the downpour, shaking umbrellas and cursing the weather. I'd come into work on a proposal, blueprints spread across a corner table, pencil lines tracing the skeleton of a building I'd never get credit for. I was good at that. Being invisible. Being the foundation no one notices until it cracks. That's when I saw her. She stood near the entrance, soaked to the bone. Water dripped from her hair, her coat, pooling around her boots like she'd walked straight out of the ocean. Her phone was pressed to her ear, and even from across the room, I could see the tremble in her hand. She was arguing with someone. Her voice never rose, but her face did all the screaming. When she finally hung up, she just stood there. Shivering. Lost. I didn't think. I just moved. I crossed the cafe, slipping off my jacket as I walked, and draped it over her shoulders before she even noticed me standing there. She flinched. Turned. Stared at me like I'd just done something impossible. "You don't even know me," she said. Her voice was soft, confused, like kindness was a language she'd forgotten how to speak. "You looked cold," I replied. She blinked. And then she smiled. It was the saddest smile I'd ever seen. Small. Fragile. Like it might break if I looked at it too long. But it stayed with me. 4 days. 4 weeks. Maybe forever. "Thank you," she whispered, pulling the jacket tighter around herself. I shrugged, trying to play it off. "It's just a jacket." "It's not," she said quietly. And I didn't know what she meant. Not yet. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment. The rain hammered against the windows. People pushed past us, ordering lattes and croissants, living their lives like the world wasn't ending. But between us, the air felt heavy. Like something had shifted. Like a door I didn't know existed had just cracked open. "Can I buy you a coffee?" I asked. "You look like you've had a rough day." She hesitated. I could see her weighing it, whether to let a stranger in, whether she had the energy to pretend she was okay. "I'd like that," she said finally. Her name was Elise. She told me over a cappuccino that had gone cold because neither of us could stop talking. She was an art curator. She worked at a gallery downtown, surrounded by beautiful things created by people who poured their souls into canvas and clay. She said it like it was a confession. Like she was ashamed to love something so deeply. "I spend my days around passion," she said, stirring her untouched coffee. "And I go home to someone who doesn't even ask how my day was." I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. The engagement ring on her finger caught the light every time she moved her hand, glinting like a warning sign I chose to ignore. "What about you?" she asked, turning the conversation away from herself. "What do you do?" "Architecture," I said. "Mostly designing buildings no one will ever notice." She frowned. "Why wouldn't they notice?" "Because good architecture doesn't call attention to itself. It just holds everything together. Quietly." She looked at me for a long time. Like she was seeing something beneath the surface. "That sounds lonely," she said. I laughed, but it came out hollow. "Maybe it is." We talked for 2 hours. About art and blueprints and the way rain makes a city feel like it's holding its breath. She told me about her fiancé, Marcus. How he worked 80-hour weeks. How he forgot her birthday. How she felt like a ghost in her own relationship. I don't think he sees me anymore, she said quietly. I think he sees the idea of me. The version of me that fits into his plan. What do you see when you look at him? I asked. She stared into her coffee. I don't know. I used to see everything. Now I just see empty space. I wanted to tell her she deserved better. That she deserved someone who looked at her the way I was looking at her right then, like she was the only person in the room. In the world. But I didn't. Because I was just a stranger in a coffee shop. And she was engaged to someone else. When the rain finally stopped, she handed my jacket back, folded carefully like it mattered. Thank you, she said again. For listening. For this. Anytime, I said. And I meant it. She hesitated at the door, one hand on the handle, rain-slicked streets stretching out behind her. Can I give you my number? She asked. In case you want to talk again? I should have said no. I should have smiled politely and let her walk out of my life. Instead, I pulled out my phone. She typed her number in, fingers hesitant, like she was crossing a line she couldn't uncross. In case you want to talk again, she said softly, echoing her own words. I did. God, I did. More than I should have. Over the next few weeks, we became friends. At least, that's what I told myself. That's what I wrote in my journal late at night when I couldn't sleep because she'd texted me something that made me smile. That's what I repeated like a mantra every time she mentioned Marcus, and my chest tightened like a fist closing around my heart. Friendship doesn't usually involve late-night calls where you hear someone cry and wish you could reach through the phone to hold them. Friendship doesn't make your chest ache every time they mention someone else's name. Friendship doesn't feel like drowning and breathing at the same time. But I told myself it was friendship. Because the alternative was admitting I was falling for someone I could never have. And I was good at lying to myself. I always had been. I knew I was falling. I just didn't know I was falling alone. Not yet. The first text came 3 days after we met. Late at night. Just 3 words. Asterisk, are you awake? Asterisk. I stared at my phone, heart hammering. I should have ignored it. Should have set a boundary. Should have protected myself from what I already knew was coming. Instead, I typed back. Asterisk always. Asterisk. And that's how it started. The late-night messages that turned into calls. The calls that turned into confessions. She told me things she didn't tell Marcus. About her childhood. Her fears. Her dreams of opening her own gallery someday. About how she felt like she was disappearing inside a relationship that looked perfect from the outside but felt hollow within. Why do you stay? I asked one night, my voice careful. Because leaving feels harder than staying, she said. Because I don't know who I am without him. Because I'm scared. Of what? Of being alone. Of making the wrong choice. Of realizing I wasted years on something that was never right. I wanted to tell her that staying was the waste. That she deserved to be with someone who made her feel alive, not invisible. But I was falling in love with her. And love makes you patient. It makes you wait. It makes you believe that if you just hold on long enough, if you're just present enough, kind enough, understanding enough, eventually, they'll see you. Eventually, they'll choose you. I was wrong. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that when she said my name, soft, like a prayer, I felt like I mattered. And I hadn't felt that way in years. So I kept answering. Kept listening. Kept being there. And with every conversation, every laugh, every moment of vulnerability she shared, I fell deeper. Into love. Into hope. Into a fantasy that would eventually destroy me. We started meeting every week. It began innocently enough, coffee on Wednesdays, a standing appointment neither of us acknowledged as anything more than casual. But coffee turned into dinners. Dinners turned into long walks through the city where she'd talk about art and I'd talk about architecture, and somewhere between the streetlights and the silence, we built something fragile and dangerous. We balance each other, she said one night as we stood on a bridge overlooking the river. The water below reflected the city lights, turning the darkness into something almost beautiful. You think so? I asked. She nodded, leaning against the railing. You ground me. I don't feel like I'm floating away when I'm with you. I wanted to tell her she did the same for me. That before I met her, I'd been sleepwalking through my own life. But I didn't. Because she wore an engagement ring that caught the light every time she gestured, every time she laughed, every time she touched my arm and said, "You really get me." And I did get her. I understood her in ways Marcus never would. Marcus. I learned to hate that name. Not because of who he was, but because of who he wasn't. He was a lawyer. Successful. Ambitious. The kind of man who looked good on paper but felt empty in person. He worked late. Forgot anniversaries. Cancelled plans. And Elise? She forgave him. Every single time. He's under a lot of pressure, she'd say, making excuses for a man who didn't deserve them. He's taking you for granted, I'd reply. Carefully. Because I knew if I pushed too hard, she'd pull away. Maybe, she'd admit. But he loves me. He just doesn't know how to show it. I wanted to scream. To tell her that love isn't something you have to decode. That if someone truly loves you, you never have to wonder. But I didn't. Because I was her friend. Her safe space. The man she turned to when Marcus turned away. Our Wednesdays became sacred. I'd finish work early, my mind already wandering to whatever restaurant we'd try, whatever exhibit she wanted to see, whatever corner of the city we'd explore together. I started noticing things I'd never noticed before, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, the way she bit her lip when she was thinking, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about a painting she loved. I memorized her. Without meaning to. Without trying. She became the lens through which I saw the world. One Wednesday, she showed up with paint on her hands. Sorry, she said, laughing as she tried to wipe it off with a napkin. I was working on something and lost track of time. What are you working on? I asked. Her smile faltered. Just something personal. I'll show you when it's done. I didn't push. But I was curious. Elise rarely painted anymore, she'd told me that weeks ago. She said curating other people's art had made her forget how to create her own. 2 weeks later, she invited me to her apartment. Marcus was working late. Again. She said she wanted to show me something. Her apartment was exactly what I'd imagined, walls covered in art, bookshelves overflowing, soft lighting that made everything feel intimate. Candles burned on the coffee table. Jazz played softly from a speaker. It felt like stepping into her mind. Wine, she offered. Sure. She poured us each a glass and led me to her studio, a small room at the end of the hall filled with unfinished canvases and the smell of oil paint. I've been working on this, she said, turning a canvas toward me. I stared. It was a painting of a man standing in the rain, holding an umbrella over an empty space beside him. The colors were muted, grays and blues bleeding into each other like a bruise. But the man's face was detailed. Haunted. His eyes stared out from the canvas, filled with longing and resignation. It's called waiting, she said softly. My throat tightened. Who's he waiting for? She looked at me for a long time. Too long. The air between us felt charged, heavy with something unspoken. Someone who'll never come, she whispered. I wanted to tell her I was already there. That I'd been there all along. That she didn't need to wait for someone who couldn't see her when I saw nothing else. But I didn't. Because she wore an engagement ring. And I was just her friend. It's beautiful, I said finally. Sad. But beautiful. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That's the only kind of beauty I know how to create anymore. We stood there in silence, staring at the painting. And I realized something terrible. I was that man. The one standing in the rain. Holding an umbrella over a space that would always be empty. Because she would never choose me. Thank you for showing me, I said quietly. Thank you for seeing it, she replied. We drank wine on her couch after that. Talked about nothing and everything. She told me about a fight she'd had with Marcus that morning, something about him missing another dinner, another promise broken. I listened. Comforted. Reassured. And when she leaned her head on my shoulder, exhausted and vulnerable, I let her. Even though it hurt. Even though I knew I was setting myself up for heartbreak. Because in that moment, with her warmth pressed against me, her breathing slow and steady, I could pretend. Pretend she was mine. Pretend this was my life. Pretend I wasn't just the man holding the umbrella. The weeks blurred together after that. Coffee turned into dinners, turned into late-night conversations that stretched until 2 a.m. She'd text me from bed while Marcus slept beside her. Asterisk, can't sleep. You awake? Asterisk. Asterisk, always. Asterisk. And we'd talk. About dreams and fears and all the things she couldn't say to him. And somewhere in the middle of all that comforting, all that listening, all that being there when he wasn't, I stopped being her friend. I became her everything. At least, I thought I did. I thought the way she looked at me meant something. I thought the way she leaned into my touch, the way she laughed at my jokes, the way she said my name like it was a secret, I thought it meant I mattered. I thought I was special. But I was wrong. Because when Marcus finally proposed a wedding date, she didn't hesitate. She didn't call me to talk it through. Didn't ask my opinion. Didn't second guess. She just said yes. And I realized I'd been living in a fantasy. A story where I was the hero. But in her story, I was just a supporting character. The man who held the umbrella while she waited for someone else. And no matter how long I stood there, no matter how much I loved her, she was never going to turn around and see me. She was always going to be looking past me. Waiting for someone who wasn't there. While I stood in the rain, getting soaked, pretending I didn't mind. Pretending it was enough. It happened on a rooftop under a sky full of stars. She'd invited me to an art exhibit after-party, one of those pretentious events where people drink expensive wine and pretend to understand abstract expressionism. Marcus was supposed to come. He didn't. Work emergency. Again. I'm sorry, she'd texted. Asterisk, I know you hate these things. But I don't want to go alone. Asterisk. I should have said no. Should have made an excuse. Should have protected myself. Instead, I showed up in the only suit I owned, rehearsing casual conversation in my head, pretending my heart wasn't pounding at the thought of seeing her. She was standing near the entrance when I arrived, wearing a black dress that made her look like a poem I'd never be able to write. Her hair was up. Her eyes were tired. But when she saw me, she smiled, small, genuine, grateful, and I forgot how to breathe. You came, she said. Of course. Thank you. I know these aren't your thing. You're my thing, I wanted to say. But I didn't. I just smiled and followed her inside. The party was pretentious and boring. People talked loudly about symbolism and technique, waving wine glasses like weapons. Elise navigated it effortlessly, introducing me to artists and collectors, laughing at jokes I didn't understand. But I could see the exhaustion behind her smile. The way she checked her phone every few minutes, hoping for a text from Marcus that never came. Around 11, she grabbed my hand. Let's get out of here. We took the elevator to the rooftop terrace. The city sprawled beneath us like a constellation of broken dreams. The air was cool, the music from the party muffled below. It felt like we were the only two people in the world. She leaned against the railing, wine glass dangling from her fingers, staring at the lights below. Do you ever feel like you're living the wrong life? She asked quietly. What do you mean? She turned to me, eyes glassy from the wine, or maybe from something deeper. Like you made a choice a long time ago, and now you're stuck watching it play out, even though you know it's wrong. My heart pounded. Elise. Do you think people can love two people at once? She interrupted, voice barely above a whisper. Time stopped. The noise from the party below faded. The city disappeared. It was just her and me and a question that felt like a lit match tossed into gasoline. I don't know, I said carefully. Can they? She looked at me. Really looked at me. And for the first time, I saw it. She loved me. Maybe not the way I loved her. Maybe not enough to change anything. But she loved me. I think I do, she whispered. I should have walked away. Should have said something rational. Should have protected myself. Instead, I kissed her. And she kissed me back. For one perfect, terrible moment, I believed she was mine. Her hands were in my hair. My arms were around her waist. She tasted like wine and regret and everything I'd ever wanted. The world tilted. My heart shattered and rebuilt itself in the same breath. It felt like coming home and falling off a cliff at the same time. I pulled her closer, desperate, terrified this moment would end. That I'd wake up and realize I'd imagined it. Her lips were soft. Her breath was warm. She made a small sound against my mouth, and it destroyed me. This was everything. This was what I'd been waiting for. But when we pulled apart, she was crying. I can't do this, she whispered, stepping back. I'm getting married. The words hit me like a physical blow. Then don't, I said, voice breaking. Marry me instead. She stared at me, eyes wide, like I'd just shattered something precious. Ryan. I'm serious, I said, desperation bleeding into my voice. Marry me. Choose me. I'll spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. You don't mean that. I've never meant anything more. Silence. She looked at me like I was a stranger. Like I'd just destroyed something we could never get back. You're my best friend, she said finally, voice trembling. I can't lose you. You already have, I said. The words hung in the air between us. Final. Irreversible. She took another step back, wrapping her arms around herself. I should go. Elise, please. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. And then she was gone. I stood on that rooftop for hours after she left, watching the stars blur through tears, listening to the city hum below, realizing I'd just confessed my love to someone who would never choose me. The man in the painting. The one holding the umbrella over empty space. That was me. And I'd been waiting in the rain for someone who was never coming. I pulled out my phone. Stared at her name. Typed and deleted a dozen messages. Finally, I just wrote. Asterisk, I meant every word. Asterisk. I hit send. Then I turned off my phone. Because I couldn't watch her not respond. I couldn't watch her choose him again. I sat down on the cold concrete, back against the railing, and let myself break. For the first time in months, I stopped pretending I was okay. I wasn't okay. I was in love with someone who loved me back, just not enough. And that was so much worse than not being loved at all. 2 weeks of silence. 14 days where I stared at my phone, willing it to ring. 14 nights where I replayed that kiss over and over, wondering if I'd imagined the way she kissed me back. I didn't reach out. She didn't either. I told myself it was over. That I'd finally said what I needed to say, and now I could move on. Find someone who would choose me first. Build a life that didn't revolve around waiting. I threw myself into work. Stayed late at the office. Sketched buildings until my hand cramped. I avoided the coffee shop where we met. Deleted our text thread without reading it. Unfollowed her on social media. I was trying to purge her from my system. It wasn't working. Every song reminded me of her. Every rainy day. Every woman with dark hair who wasn't her. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., reaching for my phone, forgetting we weren't talking anymore. Forgetting I'd ruined everything by telling the truth. My coworker asked if I was okay. I lied and said I was fine. My mom called. I let it go to voicemail. I was a ghost in my own life. Again. And then she called. It was a Thursday. Late afternoon. I was leaving the office when my phone buzzed. Her name lit up the screen, and my heart stopped. I almost didn't answer. My thumb hovered over the decline button. But even after everything, I couldn't do it. I answered. Ryan? Her voice was small. Fragile. Hey. She paused. I could hear her breathing, gathering courage. I need to ask you something. And I need you to say yes. My stomach dropped. What is it? There was a long silence. Then, be my backup groom. I stopped walking. People flowed around me on the sidewalk, but I couldn't move. What? Marcus has been distant, she said, words tumbling out like a confession she'd been holding in too long. More than usual. He's pulling away. I think he's having second thoughts. And I'm scared, Ryan. I'm scared he'll leave me at the altar. Elise. I just need to know someone will be there. Someone who loves me. My chest tightened. You can't be serious. I am. Her voice cracked. Please. You're the only person I trust. I wanted to scream. To tell her how cruel this was. How she was asking me to stand in a church and watch her marry someone else while holding me as her safety net. How she was breaking me all over again. Do you understand what you're asking me? I said quietly. I know it's not fair. Not fair. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Elise, you kissed me. You told me you loved me. And now you want me to be your backup plan? To stand there in a suit, ready to marry you if your first choice doesn't show up. It's not like that? Then what is it like? Silence. I'm scared, she whispered finally. I don't know what else to do. I closed my eyes. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to say no. To hang up. To block her number and never look back. But love isn't rational. Love is standing in the rain. Holding an umbrella. Waiting for someone who'll never come. Okay, I said quietly. What? I'll do it. She exhaled in relief, and I heard the smile in her voice. Thank you. Thank you so much. I knew I could count on you. Yeah, I said, voice hollow. You can always count on me. We talked for a few more minutes. She told me the wedding was in a month. That she'd send me the details. That it meant the world to her that I'd do this. When she hung up, I stood on that sidewalk for a long time. And then I laughed. It was a broken, bitter sound. The laugh of a man who'd just realized he was the punchline to a joke he didn't find funny. A backup groom. I wasn't even the main character in her love story. I was the understudy. The failsafe. The emotional insurance policy. I walked home in a daze. Climbed the stairs to my apartment. Locked the door behind me. And then I broke. I threw my keys across the room. Slammed my fist into the wall. Collapsed on the floor with my back against the couch, head in my hands. What was I doing? Why did I say yes? Because I loved her. Because I was pathetic. Because some stupid, desperate part of me still believed that if I just stayed close enough, patient enough, present enough, she'd wake up and choose me. But she wouldn't. She never would. I was the man who held the umbrella. And she was always going to be looking past me. The next month was torture. She called me almost every day. Stressed about flowers. Panicking about seating charts. Asking my opinion on centerpieces like I wasn't dying inside every time she said the word wedding. Do you think peonies or roses? She asked one afternoon. I think you should marry someone who doesn't make you need a backup plan, I said. Silence. Ryan. Peonies, I said, cutting her off. They're softer. More romantic. Thank you, she said quietly. I helped her address invitations. Listened to her stress about her dress fitting. Reassured her when she panicked about the weather forecast. I became her wedding planner. Her therapist. Her emotional support. Everything except what I wanted to be. The worst part? I even helped her write her vows. We sat in her apartment one evening, Marcus at the office, wine glasses between us, and she asked me what love sounded like. What do you mean? I asked. I don't know what to say to him, she admitted. I know I love him. But when I try to write it down, the words feel empty. Asterisk because they are, asterisk I wanted to say. Asterisk because you don't love him the way you should. Because you're marrying him out of fear, not love. Asterisk. But I didn't. Instead, I helped her craft vows that sounded like poetry. Asterisk, you are my foundation. My constant. The life I've built and the future I choose. Asterisk. Beautiful lies dressed up as promises. And every single word felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. That's perfect, she said, tears in her eyes. You always know exactly what to say. Asterisk except when it matters, asterisk I thought. Asterisk except when I'm saying it to you. Asterisk. I went home that night and stared at the ceiling until dawn. I thought about backing out. About calling her and telling her I couldn't do it. That she was asking too much. But I didn't. Because I'd already said yes. And I never knew how to say no to her. Every moment I spent helping her plan a wedding I'd never be part of, I died a little more inside. But I kept showing up. Because that's what I did. I was the man who held the umbrella. Who stood in the rain. Who waited for someone who would never come. And I hated myself for it. But I didn't know how to stop. Not yet. The night before the wedding, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the vows I'd written for her. Not the ones I'd helped her write for Marcus. These were different. Mine. The truth I'd never been brave enough to say out loud. I'd written them weeks ago, late one night when I couldn't sleep, when the weight of loving her had become too heavy to carry silently anymore. Asterisk, you are the rain I never run from. The silence I crave. The story I'll never finish writing. And even if you never see me the way I see you, I'll stand in the rain for the rest of my life, just to keep you dry. Asterisk. I read them over and over, the words blurring as my eyes burned. They were honest. Raw. Everything I felt distilled into a few sentences that would never be spoken, never be heard, never matter. And something inside me snapped. I stood up, pacing my apartment, the vows crumpled in my fist. My hands shook. My chest heaved. I felt like I was coming apart at the seams. I wasn't noble. I wasn't selfless. I was pathetic. I had let her use me. Let her keep me close enough to feel loved but far enough to never be chosen. I was her emotional affair. Her second choice. Her backup plan. I was the man who stood in the rain, holding an umbrella over empty space, while she searched the horizon for someone else. And I was done. I grabbed my phone, hands trembling, and scrolled through my contacts until I found his number. Marcus. We'd met once at a dinner party months ago. Elise had insisted I come, said it would be good for me to meet him. It had been awkward and uncomfortable. He'd shaken my hand with a firm grip and immediately checked his phone. We'd exchanged maybe 10 words the entire night. But I still had his number. I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering over the call button. What was I doing? If I made this call, there was no going back. This would change everything. Destroy everything. But maybe that's what needed to happen. Maybe some things needed to be destroyed before they could be rebuilt. Or let go. I pressed call. It rang once. Twice. Hello? His voice was calm. Measured. The voice of a man who had everything under control. Marcus. It's Ryan. Elise's friend. A pause. I could hear him thinking, trying to place me. Oh. Hey. Everything okay? We need to talk. About your wedding. What about it? I took a deep breath. About the man she's been turning to when you're not there. The silence on the other end was deafening. I could hear him breathing. Thinking. Processing. For a moment, I thought he might hang up. Might tell me to go to hell. Might pretend he didn't know what I was talking about. Instead, he said quietly, meet me tomorrow morning. Before the ceremony. Okay. Where? The diner 2 blocks from the church. 7 a.m. I'll be there. Ryan? Yeah? This better not be a joke. It's not, I said. I promise. He hung up. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. What had I just done? I'd just set fire to everything. To her wedding. To our friendship. To whatever fragile, broken thing we'd built between us. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining how the conversation would go. What I'd say. How he'd react. Whether I was making a mistake. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. Because even if this destroyed everything, even if Elise never spoke to me again, I couldn't stand at that altar and watch her marry someone while pretending I was okay. I couldn't be her backup anymore. I couldn't keep waiting in the rain. At 6 a.m., I got up. Showered. Got dressed. Simple clothes, jeans and a t-shirt. I wasn't going to the wedding. Not as a guest. Not as a backup. I was going to set myself free. I grabbed the vows I'd written, the real ones, and folded them carefully. Then I walked out the door. The morning air was cool and clean. The city was waking up slowly, stretching and yawning. And somewhere across town, Elise was probably getting ready. Putting on a dress. Doing her makeup. Becoming a bride. But not mine. And I was finally ready to accept that. I walked to the diner, hands in my pockets, heart steady for the first time in weeks. This was it. The moment where I stopped being the man who held the umbrella. The moment where I walked away from the rain. And it terrified me. But it also felt like the first honest thing I'd done in months. When I reached the diner, I paused outside, took a deep breath, and walked in. Marcus was already there, sitting in a booth near the window. And everything was about to change. The diner was nearly empty when I arrived. Just a couple of truckers nursing coffee in the corner booth and a waitress who looked like she'd been working the graveyard shift for 20 years. The smell of bacon and burnt coffee hung in the air. Marcus sat in a booth near the window, staring at his phone. He looked tired. More than tired, worn down. Like a man carrying a weight he couldn't name. His suit was expensive, perfectly tailored, but it hung on him like a costume he didn't want to wear. He spotted me immediately and gestured to the seat across from him. I slid into the booth, my heart hammering. The waitress appeared. Coffee? Please, Marcus said. Same, I added, my voice steadier than I felt. She poured 2 cups and disappeared. We sat in silence for a moment. He stirred sugar into his coffee slowly, methodically, like he was buying time. Or gathering courage. Finally, he looked up. His eyes were hollow, but sharp. Assessing. Talk, he said simply. So I did. I told him everything. The coffee shop on that rainy Tuesday. The way our weekly meetings turned into something more. The late night calls when she was crying and he wasn't there. The rooftop. The kiss. The confession that shattered everything. I didn't paint myself as a hero. I was brutally, painfully honest. I'm not telling you this to hurt you, I said. Or to break you two up. I'm telling you because she asked me to be her backup groom. To stand at that altar in case you didn't show. And I realized I can't do that. I can't watch her marry you while pretending I'm okay. I can't be her safety net anymore. When I finished, he stared at his coffee for a long time. The silence stretched. I thought maybe he'd stand up and leave. Or punch me. Or tell me I was a liar. Instead, he said, I knew. I blinked. What? I knew something was going on, he said quietly, still staring at his cup. I just didn't want to face it. He looked up at me then, and his eyes were hollow. Empty. Like he'd been running on fumes for years and had finally hit empty. I've been a terrible fiancé, he continued, his voice flat. Absent. Cold. Distant. I thought if I just kept working, kept building a future for us, kept checking the boxes, it would be enough. The house. The career. The wedding. I thought that's what love was. Building something together. He laughed, sharp, bitter. But I forgot about the together part, didn't I? I didn't know what to say. She needed you to be present. Not perfect, I said quietly. And you were, he said, not as an accusation, but as a fact. You were everything I wasn't. Available. Attentive. Actually there. I was her backup plan, I said. Not her choice. He looked at me with something that might have been respect. Or pity. Or recognition. Like he saw himself in me, a man loving someone who couldn't fully love him back. Why are you telling me this? He asked. You could have just let this play out. Let me marry her. Kept being her, whatever you are to her. I slid the folded vows across the table. Because I'm done being whatever I am to her. And because she deserves better than two men who are only half there. He picked up the paper carefully, like it might disintegrate in his hands. These are for her, I said. Everything I never said. Everything I felt. Everything that doesn't matter anymore. Maybe you should be the one to give them to her. He unfolded the vows and read them silently. I watched his expression shift, surprise, sadness, understanding, and something else. Recognition, maybe. Or grief. When he finished, he refolded them carefully and set them down gently on the table between us. What are you going to do? He asked. I'm going to let her go, I said. Walk away. Start over. Stop waiting for someone who's never going to choose me. He nodded slowly. And what do you want me to do? I want you to make a choice, I said, leaning forward. Either be the man she needs, or let her find someone who will. But don't marry her out of obligation. Don't marry her because it's the plan you've been following for 3 years. Don't marry her because you're afraid of starting over. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Marry her because you can't imagine your life without her. Because she's the first person you think of when you wake up and the last one you think of before you sleep. Because loving her feels like breathing. If you can't say that, if you can't feel that, then don't marry her. Let her go. Let both of you find something real. He stared at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he picked up the vows again and put them in his jacket pocket, right over his heart. Thank you, he said quietly. For being honest. For caring about her enough to blow up your own life. I'm not doing this for you, I said. Or even for her. I'm doing it for me. Because I can't keep drowning while pretending I'm swimming. He nodded. I understand. He stood up, threw a 20 on the table, and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he paused and looked back. For what it's worth, he said, she's lucky to have been loved like that. Even if she doesn't deserve it. Even if she couldn't return it the way you needed. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. He walked out, and the door chimed behind him. I sat there alone in the diner, staring at the steam rising from my untouched coffee, listening to the low murmur of the truckers in the corner, feeling lighter and emptier at the same time. I didn't know what Marcus would do. If he'd actually read my vows to her. If he'd call off the wedding. If he'd go through with it and pretend this conversation never happened. But it didn't matter anymore. Because I'd finally done it. I'd let her go. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't go inside the church. I stood outside, hands in my pockets, listening to the muted sound of organ music drifting through stained glass windows. The sun was bright. Too bright for a day that felt like an ending. People filed past me in their Sunday best, women in floral dresses and wide-brimmed hats, men in suits that looked uncomfortable. They clutched programs and whispered excitedly about the bride, about how beautiful the church looked, about what a perfect day it was for a wedding. A perfect day. I almost laughed. I stood under a tree across the street, far enough that no one would recognize me, close enough that I could hear the music swell when the doors opened. I didn't know why I'd come. Morbid curiosity, maybe. Or closure. Or maybe I just needed to see it end with my own eyes. To watch the door close completely before I could finally walk away. Inside, the ceremony would be starting soon. Marcus would be standing at the altar, my vows folded in his pocket, words I'd poured my heart into, words meant for a woman who'd never hear them from my lips. Would he really read them? Would he have the courage to stand in front of everyone, her family, his family, their friends, and expose the truth? Or would he tuck them away and pretend our conversation never happened? Go through with the wedding, exchange vows he didn't mean, and build a life on a foundation of unspoken resentments and half-truths? I didn't know. And the not knowing was excruciating. The music changed. The wedding march began. She'd be walking down the aisle now. Elise. In a dress that made her look like a dream I'd never wake from. Her father at her side. A bouquet of peonies in her hands, the ones I'd suggested. I closed my eyes and imagined it. The way her eyes would shine behind the veil. The way she'd smile nervously. The way she'd look at Marcus standing at the altar, waiting for her, and believe this was right. That this was love. That this was enough. But was it? Did she feel the same flutter in her stomach when she looked at him that I felt when I looked at her? Did her heart race? Did the world fade away? Or was it just comfortable? Safe? Expected? I'd never know. The music swelled and then stopped. The ceremony had begun. I imagined Marcus standing there, hands clasped, watching her approach. I imagined him reaching into his pocket, fingers brushing against the folded paper. Would he do it? Would he really read my vows in front of everyone? These aren't my words, I imagined him saying, voice steady. Asterisk, they're his. The man you asked to be your backup. The man who loved you when I didn't. Asterisk. And then he'd read. Asterisk, you are the rain I never run from. The silence I crave. The story I'll never finish writing. And even if you never see me the way I see you, I'll stand in the rain for the rest of my life, just to keep you dry. Asterisk. I imagined the gasps. The murmurs rippling through the pews. Her bridesmaids exchanging shocked glances. Her mother's hand flying to her mouth. And Elise. I imagined the recognition dawning in her eyes. The confusion giving way to understanding. The shame. The guilt. The realization that the man who loved her most was the one she'd hurt the most. Would she cry? Would she run? Would she stand there frozen, finally understanding what she'd done? Or would Marcus not read them at all? Would he just recite traditional vows, exchange rings, and kiss the bride while my words stayed folded and forgotten in his pocket? I didn't know. And I didn't need to. Because regardless of what happened inside that church, I was done. Done waiting. Done hoping. Done standing in the rain. A commotion erupted inside the church. Raised voices. Gasps. The sound of chairs scraping. Then, silence. My heart pounded. What had happened? Part of me wanted to run to the doors, to peek inside, to see what was unfolding. But I didn't move. Because it didn't matter anymore. Whatever happened in there, whether Marcus read my vows, whether the wedding fell apart, whether Elise realized what she'd lost, it wasn't my story anymore. I'd spent 2 years being a character in her story. The supportive friend. The emotional crutch. The backup plan. But I wasn't that person anymore. I was the protagonist of my own story now. And this chapter was ending. I took one last look at the church, at the stained glass windows glowing in the sunlight, at the white flowers draped over the entrance, at the life I'd never be part of. And then I turned away. I walked down the street, away from the church, away from her, away from the version of myself who believed being someone's second choice was better than being no one's choice at all. The sun was warm on my face. The air smelled like summer. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked. A child laughed. Life went on, indifferent to heartbreak and endings and new beginnings. And for the first time in 2 years, I felt free. Not happy. Not yet. But free. Free from the weight of unrequited love. Free from the constant ache of wanting someone who'd never want me back. Free from the rain. I stopped at a crosswalk, waiting for the light to change, and looked up at the sky. It was clear. Painfully, brilliantly clear. No rain. No clouds. Just blue stretching out forever. And I thought, this is what it feels like to let go. The light changed. I crossed the street. And I never looked back. 3 days of silence. 72 hours where I lived in a strange kind of limbo, not quite moved on, but no longer drowning. I didn't check social media. Didn't ask mutual friends what happened. Didn't Google wedding disaster or runaway bride or any of the things my restless mind wanted to know. I just existed. I went to work. Sketched buildings. Ordered takeout. Watched movies I'd been meaning to see. I moved through the world like a ghost, but a lighter one. A ghost unburdened. The weight I'd been carrying for 2 years, the weight of loving someone who couldn't love me back, of being someone's safety net, of waiting for a choice that would never come, was gone. And in its absence, I felt hollow. But also strangely at peace. My coworker, Janet, asked if I was okay. "You seem different," she said, studying me over her coffee. "I am different," I replied. "Good different or bad different?" I thought about it. Honest different. She didn't push. Just nodded and went back to her desk. And then she called. The first time, I was making coffee. Monday morning, barely 7 a.m. Her name lit up my screen, and my heart seized. For a moment, I just stared at it, watching it ring and ring, my thumb hovering over the answer button. Then it went to voicemail. I exhaled, set my phone down, and continued making coffee with shaking hands. The second time, I was in a meeting. Her name flashed on my phone sitting face up on the conference table. My boss was mid-sentence when I reached over and silenced it. "Sorry," I muttered. He continued talking. I didn't hear a word. The third, fourth, fifth times, I just let it ring. Each time felt easier. Like cutting a thread. Like loosening a grip. Like learning to breathe without thinking about it. By the sixth call, she stopped trying. And then came the voicemail. It sat there for hours, a little notification badge burning a hole through my phone, through my pocket, through my carefully constructed piece. I knew I should delete it. Unheard. Unacknowledged. Let it fade into digital oblivion like our friendship, our almost romance, our entire broken story. But I couldn't. Late that night, sitting on my couch in the dark, I finally pressed play. "Ryan." Her voice was wrecked. Raw. Like she'd been crying for days. Like she'd shattered into pieces and was trying to speak through the cracks. I don't even know what to say. I don't know where to start. A shaky breath? I could picture her, phone pressed to her ear, tears streaming, trying to hold herself together. "Marcus, read your vows at the altar. In front of everyone." My breath caught. He pulled them out during the ceremony and said, "These aren't my words. They're his. The man you asked to be your backup. The man who loved you when I didn't." And then he read them. Every single word. Her voice cracked. Everyone just stared. My bridesmaids looked horrified. My dad looked confused. My mom was crying. And I just stood there, frozen, realizing what I'd done to you. What I'd asked of you. How selfish I'd been. A pause. The sound of her trying to breathe through tears. "He told me he couldn't marry someone who loved someone else. He said you deserve better than being my safety net. He said we both deserve better than half-truths and comfort instead of passion." Another breath. Steadier now, but still broken. And then he walked away. Just turned around and walked down the aisle and out the door. "The wedding's over, Ryan. It's all over." Silence. I didn't realize. I didn't know I was hurting you. I swear I didn't. I thought you were okay with just being my friend. I thought you understood. But you weren't okay, were you? You were just too kind to say no. Too good to walk away. You stayed and stayed and stayed, even when it was killing you. She was fully crying now. Ugly, gasping sobs that made my chest ache even through the phone. "I'm so sorry. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I used you. I kept you close because you made me feel seen and loved and important, and I was selfish. So selfish. I took your love and treated it like it was free, like it didn't cost you anything, like you'd always just be there no matter how much I hurt you." A long pause. "I need you to know. I did love you. I do love you. It's just, I didn't know how to choose you over the life I'd already planned. Over the version of myself I thought I was supposed to be. The girl who marries the successful lawyer. The girl who has the perfect wedding. The girl who doesn't mess everything up. Another breath. Her voice dropped to a whisper. But I did mess everything up. And I don't know who I am now. Without a wedding. Without Marcus. Without you. I don't know what happens next. I don't know how to fix this, or if I even can. The longest pause yet. I miss you. I'm so sorry. I love you. The voicemail ended. I sat there in the dark, phone still pressed to my ear, heart hammering against my ribs, tears sliding down my face. For a long time, I didn't move. Her words echoed in my head. Asterisk, I did love you. I do love you. Asterisk. Part of me, the part that had loved her for 2 years, that had held her while she cried, that had kissed her on that rooftop, wanted to call her back. To tell her it was okay. To forgive her and start over and try again. But I couldn't. Because her apology wasn't mine to carry. Her guilt wasn't my burden. Her love, complicated, conditional, too late, wasn't something I needed anymore. I'd spent 2 years waiting for her to choose me. And she'd finally said the words I'd been desperate to hear. But they didn't fix anything. They didn't erase the months of being her backup plan. They didn't undo the pain of watching her plan a wedding to someone else. They didn't change the fact that she only realized she loved me after she'd lost everything else. I wasn't her choice. I was her consolation prize. And I deserve better than that. I took a deep breath, opened my phone, and navigated to the voicemail. My finger hovered over the delete button. Asterisk, I love you. Asterisk, her voice echoed in my memory. I pressed delete. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. But because I was finally choosing myself. I set my phone down, screen dark, and exhaled into the silence. It was done. We were done. And for the first time since I met her in that coffee shop on a rainy Tuesday, I felt whole. Not because I'd healed completely. But because I'd stopped bleeding. 6 months later, I moved to a new city. Portland. Rain and coffee and mountains that made you feel small in the best way possible. I'd always wanted to live somewhere greener, somewhere slower, somewhere that felt less like running and more like arriving. I took a job at a sustainable architecture firm, designing green buildings, solar installations, structures that gave back to the earth instead of taking from it. It was everything I'd dreamed of but never pursued because I'd been too busy being her emotional crutch, too busy waiting for my real life to start. It had started. Finally. My apartment was small but mine, hardwood floors, big windows, a view of the river. I filled it with plants and books and half-finished sketches. I made it a home instead of a place I slept. I started running in the mornings. Nothing serious at first, just a few blocks, lungs burning, legs protesting. But slowly, I built endurance. Strength. I started looking forward to the way my body felt after a run. Alive. Present. Mine. I read again. Real books, not just articles on my phone. I devoured novels and memoirs and poetry. I underlined passages that felt like they were written specifically for me. I filled journals with sketches and half-formed thoughts and plans for the future. And I painted. I'd never painted before. Elise showed me that painting of the man in the rain. But after I left, after I started over, I couldn't stop. I bought cheap supplies from a craft store and turned the corner of my living room into a makeshift studio. I painted buildings and bridges and rain-soaked streets. I painted abstracts that didn't make sense but felt true. I painted the feeling of letting go. One Saturday, I went to the animal shelter. I hadn't planned on adopting a dog. I'd just gone to volunteer, to walk the dogs no one else wanted to walk. But then I saw him, a scruffy terrier mix with one ear that flopped and eyes that had seen too much. The shelter called him Buddy. He's been here 8 months, the volunteer said sadly. Nobody wants an older dog with anxiety. I knelt down. He approached slowly, cautiously, like he'd been disappointed before. Then he licked my hand. I'll take him, I said. I renamed him Poet. And every single day, he greeted me like I was the most important person in the world. No conditions. No second guessing. Just pure, uncomplicated love. I built a life that didn't revolve around waiting for someone to choose me. And somewhere along the way, I stopped checking my phone for her name. The gallery opening was a fluke. A coworker, Sarah, knew someone who ran a small gallery downtown. They were doing a showcase for local artists, painters, sculptors, photographers, architects. Bring some of your work, she'd said casually over lunch. It's low pressure. Just a community thing. Wine and cheese and people pretending to understand art. I almost said no. But that evening, I looked at the paintings stacked in the corner of my living room. The sketches scattered across my desk. The architectural drawings I'd layered with watercolor washes. And I thought, why not? I framed a few pieces. A painting of a bridge at sunset. An abstract in blues and grays that felt like rain without being rain. An architectural sketch of a building that didn't exist yet but could. And one more. A painting of a man walking away from the rain. Umbrella closed. Sky clearing. Light ahead. I titled it No Longer Waiting. The gallery was small, warm, strung with fairy lights and filled with people who actually cared about art. Not the pretentious crowd from Elise's world, these were real people. Students and retirees and young families. People who looked at art because it moved them, not because it impressed anyone. A local journalist showed up and interviewed a few artists. She spent 10 minutes looking at my work, asking questions, taking notes. The next weekend, a tiny blurb appeared in the paper's art section. Asterisk, the poetry of structure, where engineering meets emotion. Local architect Ryan Castellano explores the intersection of built environments and inner landscapes in a series of haunting, hopeful works that feel like visual confessions. Asterisk. I read it 3 times. Then I framed it and hung it in my bathroom, where I'd see it every morning. Small victories. But they mattered. The night of the opening, I stood in front of No Longer Waiting, holding a plastic cup of cheap wine, feeling lighter than I had in years. People wandered by. Some paused. Some kept walking. A woman asked if it was for sale. I said yes without thinking. It's beautiful, she said. It feels like closure. That's exactly what it is, I replied. She smiled and moved on. And then I felt someone approach. A presence beside me. Familiar and foreign at the same time. It's beautiful. I knew that voice. Every muscle in my body tensed. My heart stopped and started and stopped again. I turned slowly. Elise stood 3 feet away, hands clasped in front of her, looking at me like I was something fragile she was afraid to break. She looked different. Older. Softer. Her hair was shorter, cut to her shoulders instead of flowing down her back. Her eyes were clearer but sadder. She wore a simple dress, no jewelry except small silver earrings. No engagement ring. Ryan, she whispered. I nodded, my voice stuck somewhere in my chest. Elise. I didn't know you were in the city, she said quietly, eyes still on the painting. I saw your name in the paper. In the art section. I couldn't believe it was you. But then I saw the piece, asterisk No Longer Waiting asterisk, and I knew. She finally looked at me. Really looked. I had to come. I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing. She gestured to the painting. At the man walking away. At the closed umbrella. At the clearing sky. Is this about me? I looked at the canvas. At the man I'd painted walking into light. At the rain behind him. At the choice to leave. It was, I said quietly. But not anymore. She nodded slowly, like she'd expected that answer. Like she deserved it. Can we talk? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed at me to say no. To walk away. To protect the peace I'd fought so hard to build. But another part of me, the part that had loved her, that still carried the ghost of that love, needed closure. Real closure. Okay, I said. We sat on a bench outside the gallery, the night cool and quiet around us. The city hummed softly, cars in the distance, laughter from a nearby bar, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. The gallery lights glowed warm behind us, casting long shadows across the pavement. For a long time, neither of us spoke. I studied her from the corner of my eye. She looked smaller somehow. Less certain. The confidence she used to carry, the art curator who knew exactly what she wanted, had been replaced by something softer. More fragile. Finally, she broke the silence. I'm sorry, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I know. I didn't deserve your love. I turned to look at her. No. You didn't. She flinched. But she didn't argue. Didn't make excuses. Just nodded. I spent months hating myself, she continued, staring at her hands. After the wedding fell apart, I didn't know what to do. I tried to reach out to Marcus. To apologize. To explain. But he'd already moved on. He's seeing someone now, a lawyer at his firm. I saw them together once, at a coffee shop. He looked happy, present, like a different person. That's good, I said. And I meant it. And I? She paused, choosing her words carefully. I'm trying to be. Happy, I mean. Or at least okay. I'm in therapy now. Twice a week. Trying to figure out why I do the things I do. Why I hold on to people who are wrong for me and push away people who actually care. She laughed bitterly. Turns out I have attachment issues. Who knew? I didn't laugh. Just waited. I left the gallery, she continued. Started freelancing. Curating smaller shows. Working with emerging artists. It's less prestigious, less money, but it feels real. Like I'm actually doing something that matters instead of just maintaining appearances. That's good too, I said. She finally looked at me. Really looked. Her eyes were red-rimmed, tired, but clearer than I'd ever seen them. Are you happy? She asked, voice small. I thought about my life. The firm where I designed buildings that actually helped the planet. The morning runs with Poet. The paintings. The apartment that felt like home. The mornings where I woke up and didn't feel like I was drowning. Yeah, I said. I am. She smiled through tears. I'm glad. You deserve that. We sat in silence again. Not uncomfortable. Just heavy. Full of everything we'd been and everything we'd never be. I loved you, she said finally. I need you to know that. It wasn't fake or manipulative or some game I was playing. I really did love you. I know, I said quietly. But it was selfish love, she continued. The kind that centers me instead of us. The kind that takes and takes without giving back. The kind that keeps you close enough to feel comforted but never close enough to actually choose you. She wiped her eyes. And that's not real love. I know that now. Real love is choosing someone every day. Being present. Being brave enough to say, this is what I want, instead of hedging your bets and keeping backup plans. She looked at me. I should have chosen you. That night on the rooftop. I should have been brave enough to blow up my safe, comfortable life and take a chance on something real. But I was too scared. Too worried about what people would think. Too attached to the life I thought I was supposed to have. Would it have worked? I asked. If you'd chosen me that night? She thought about it. Really thought. I don't know, she said honestly. Maybe. Or maybe I wasn't ready to be the person you deserved. Maybe I needed to lose everything to figure out who I actually was underneath all the expectations and fear. Do you think you'll ever forgive me? She asked. I thought about it. Really thought. I already have, I said. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back. It just means I'm not carrying it anymore. She nodded, fresh tears sliding down her cheeks. Thank you. For everything. For loving me. For being honest. For letting me go. Thank you, I said, for teaching me I deserved better. She laughed, small, broken, but real. I didn't teach you that. You learned it on your own. We sat a little longer. The night stretched around us, quiet and forgiving. I should go, she said finally, standing slowly. Yeah. She paused, hand on the bench, looking down at me. For what it's worth, she said softly, you were never a backup. You were just too good for the version of me that existed back then. The version that was too broken and scared to recognize what was right in front of her. I didn't respond. Just watched as she walked away, her silhouette fading into the glow of streetlights, until she disappeared completely around the corner. And I didn't feel pain. Or anger. Or longing. I felt peace. I stayed on that bench for a while after she left, staring up at the sky. It was clear. Full of stars. I thought about the painting she'd shown me all those months ago. The man standing in the rain, holding an umbrella over empty space. Waiting. I wasn't that man anymore. I was the man who'd closed the umbrella. Who'd walked away from the rain. Who'd stopped waiting and started living. Poet was waiting for me at home. My apartment was warm. My life was full. And I was happy. Finally, genuinely, completely happy. Not because I'd found someone new. Not because I'd won some imaginary competition. But because I'd found myself. I stood up, hands in my pockets, and started walking home. The night was quiet. The air was cool. Portland smelled like rain and pine and new beginnings. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't running from anything. I was walking toward something. Toward my own light. Toward a future I was building with my own hands, brick by brick, choice by choice. A future where I wasn't waiting for anyone to choose me. Because I'd already chosen myself. And that was more than enough.